In the past several years, there has been an explosion of interest in fascia, but for more than a century, many have been aware of its significance. It has not been ignored or overlooked. First, let's define what we are talking about. The body is a construct of cells. Its parenchyma is the functional tissue of an organ as distinguished from the connective and supporting tissue. Parenchyma, with its connective and supporting tissue, the fascia, construct an organ and then an organism. I first understood the importance of fascia as a budding surgeon some 60 years ago when I learned that surgeons sew fascia, not parenchyma, as parenchyma is structureless on its own. In the 1980s and 90s, I was involved with these people, and they were elbow deep in fascia. Phil Greenman from Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine, Tony Chila from Ohio University College of Osteopathic Medicine, Paul Kimberly, Professor of Anatomy at Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine, Bob Ward, Professor at MSU, and an assortment of hangers-on like John Manel, Janet Travell, Vladimir Yanda, and a few others. Evidently, I gleaned enough from them that they let me into their club, and I taught alongside them at Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine for many years. Osteopathic medicine was founded by A.T. Still, who said things like, fascia is a continuous envelope that extends from head to toe, front to back, surrounding every organ, every blood vessel, every nerve, every bone, every muscle. Fascia is the fabric of an organism, and the parenchyma is embroidered within it. So if we look at an organ like a muscle, and a muscle is an organ, muscle is a condensation of muscle parenchyma woven into the fascial fabric. It is spandex of the fascial fabric. Well, where does the fascia begin? We have to start somewhere, and of course it starts at the cell. Cells connect to each other into the extracellular matrix, the fascia, through the integrin connections, so that the cells are physically connected to each other and to the extracellular matrix. But I don't think we should ignore the fact that there's an intracellular matrix connecting the organelles within the cells, and that the intracellular matrix connects to the extracellular matrix by integrins. So there's a connection from the cell nucleus right to the skin. These connections seem helter-skelter. You are all familiar with the dance of the subcutaneous fascia, so beautifully demonstrated in Gimbarto's films. They appear to be random movements, but they are not. They conform to strict mathematical rules called Voronoi patterns, and this dance is choreographed by the second law of thermodynamics. We believe that the three-dimensional organization of the fascia fabric is a multi-nested tensegrity with its dynamics related to Delaunay patterns, the first cousin to Voronoi patterns. Well, what are little boys made of? Collagen snot, which may appear clear, formless, and absent of any structure, but desiccated and it transmutes into structured matter that is tough as shoe leather. In fact, it is shoe leather. Collagen is readily transmutable, changing from fluid to gel to semi-solid to tough and leathery. Building anything, including organisms, requires architecture and the necessary materials to construct it with. For us, the architecture is tensegrity. In the material world, we are taught that there are three forms of matter: solid, liquid, and gas, each having its distinctive associated mechanical laws, and we're stuck with them. But biologic matter is none of these. Biology is soft matter and comes with its own set of laws. Forget about gas, solids, and liquids and their associated laws. They are not part of the internal workings of an organism. Soft matter is the physics of gels, emulsions, liquid crystals, and biological matter. The display that you are staring at on your computer screen is a liquid crystal display, and things can change in your body as quickly as do the images on your screen. Soft matter is about slime and superballs, and the capability of flipping from one state to the other instantaneously. And contrary to some recent writings, there are no free liquids in the body. Starting with embryologic mesenchymal cells, the organism builds different fascial tissues depending on first the in utero and then the extra-utero stresses. The tissues are self-organizing, have emergent properties, and are transmutable, and this includes all tissues of the locomotor system: ligaments, tendons, muscles, and bone. Decalcify bone, and you have a fascial net. Within that net are the osteocytes and their connecting fascia. We therefore have parenchyma and an extracellular matrix. Put them together and you have an organ. Now coat them with hydroxyapatite crystals, which you can now recognize as icosahedrons, and voila, ossified bone. So bone then is a specialized condensation of parenchyma within the fascia, coated with hydroxyapatite crystals, essentially a starch fascia. So you can start with DNA, work into the intracellular matrix, then into a fascial continuum that engulfs the whole organism, and work your way in a circular pattern. Everything is connected to everything. The new in thing, that fascia is a sensory organ, is really an old new thing, as A.T. Still described fascia as a sensory organ over 100 years ago. As Still wrote in 1899, all nerves go to and terminate in that great system, the fascia. But I would add that it's more than just the nerves ending in the fascia. Fascia is a great communicator, and it does so by several means. By physical connection of cell to cell and cell to extracellular matrix, information is physically transferred through the entire fascial system. It does this by talking to each of its neighbors and small world networking, the way schools of fish, flocks of birds, and even your computer communicate. The central nervous system may be left out of the discussion, at least in the early stages. Some of the communication may be quite local, as shown here in the tendons, or more accurately, the muscles of the fingers, showing that they talk to each other without having to bother with the slow and cumbersome central nervous system. And now we come to one of my favorites, oscillators. Tight strings, springs, and tensegrities are oscillators. And oscillations create phase change, sound, electromagnetic forces, heat, energy transfer, pressure, and information. The cells feel, see, hear, smell, and taste each other. If there is any division in the system, it would be between the visceral fascia and what Van der Waal calls posture and locomotor system. If you take the fascia that's concerned with posture and movement and combine them with their contiguous organs of muscle and bone, you get Van der Waal's posture and locomotor system, and what Graham and I have called the mesokinetic organ. Let's go back to an earlier slide, the one that defined an organ. Now let's remove the parenchymal cells, and what are we left with? It is here where my cloth analogy unravels. We are left with the fascial net, but that is really an illusion. You may recall this earlier slide where fascial tissues arose from undifferentiated mesenchymal cells. It is the cells that create the fascia, not the fascia creating the cells. Fascia without its parenchyma would be like a spider web without its spider. I am a Jew, and like Shakespeare's Jew who could not separate flesh and blood, I cannot separate fascia from its muscle and bone. The parenchyma and its fascia are an inseparable unit. There is no separate fascia. Functionally, it is an integral part of an organ and only exists as part of its organ. That would make any therapy solely directed to the treatment of fascial malfunction a bit of wishful thinking. I'll leave you with this final quote from Andrew Taylor Still. Fascial continuity, its nervous system investments, and vascular relationships clearly demonstrate how all parts work together. The human body is a unity of function. So why the fuss over fascia?
Ezekiel saw the wheel.
He saw that wheel
Way in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel.
Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa.
In the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel.
He saw that wheel
Way in the middle of